Thank you.
Yeah, we are live now. Rudransh
Awesome.
can introduce.
Okay. Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome to ACM Alumni Talk 2023. Today, we have two very amazing people here to speak with us. First up, we have Sitara Kumbale. She graduated from our college in NITK in 2020, a bachelor's in electronical engineering. She went on to pursue higher studies, a master's of applied sciences in data economics and development from MIT, where she took courses in econometric data science, political economy, and economic development. She has also taken courses at Harvard Kennedy School in African politics, development, and social institutions. Currently, she's working as a project analyst at Instiglio, where she consults for foundation, governments, and other stakeholders to improve the effectiveness of service delivery by tying funding to impact. Okay, so Sitara, I'll let you speak now.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. And we can go to the next slide. It's really nice to be here today, um, talking to you all. It's I want to. Okay, I'm gonna start. Like, so the general structure of this is, I'm sure you guys know this, but I was given some questions to answer, and I really hope that I do a decent job in answering them. I want to preface this with saying that like everything that I'm telling you here today is my journey, and it's like things that I've done that were right for me. It doesn't generally apply. It's not kind of a cookie cutter mold that everyone can just follow along to. So yeah, I'm gonna preface it with that. Um, so who am I? I like to put that figure in there because I think it's really important in the longer kind of scheme of things. None of us are really significant, and we are all specks of dust. And I think that's important to remember and very humbling. That being said, my background is um, I am currently still technically a student at MIT, where I study data economics and development policy. So, in short, that is just a larger how do you use economics and data to enable better development and better public service delivery. Um, I also, where do I work as? I work at Instiglio, which is an organization that consults mostly with the government, but also with foundations to help them deliver public services better. And by public services, we mean large scale education programs, health campaigns, anything and everything from roads, irrigation systems, water supplies, agriculture programs, all of that. We do all of that fun stuff with the governments across the world, but I work out of the office in Nairobi, which means that I'm concentrated in East Africa, and also actually largely South Africa, East Africa, and Central Africa as well. I previously have worked with the UNDP and Wells Fargo, also NITK. Yeah, that's just a little bit about me and my background. And before I spend any additional time talking about myself, I would like to, yeah, let's move forward and get to your questions, which is I think the most important part of this. Generally, how I would like to structure this, I'm going to, again, like I said, um, when I was asked to do this talk, I spoke to one of the many mentors that I have, because he did it last year. And one thing he told me, which I think really resonated with me, is that everything that I say here today and everything that he said last year was his own experience. And like I'm reiterating this, I know it's my own experience, and that's what I'm going to talk about. And I feel like I've tried to make this talk in such a way that I'm talking about my experience, but also generally giving you guys like tips of how like I went about making certain decisions, which I think is more important than the actual decision itself that I made. That being said, I'm going to be talking a little bit about what it's like to work in the development sector, um, the kind of organizations I've worked for, and what I've learned from them. what grad school at MIT was like, why I decided to go to MIT, why I just how what my like thought processes was while I was applying, and then also what I did before MIT, which I think is probably of interest to you guys the most because that's when I was at NITK. And yeah, just also maybe a few minutes for question and answers, if any. Um, yeah, that's the general gist of this. So we can move on. So again, like I said, the disclaimer here is that no one size fits all. Um, you might not resonate with what I'm saying. It might not make sense to you. It might not be like what you like to do in life, which is perfectly fine and acceptable. Um, and my path will not be something you can obviously mimic because that's never going to be the case. But yeah, that is the disclaimer here that no one size fits all. We can move on. Thank you. Yeah, so the first one, which is NITK. What did I do at NITK? I studied a bachelor's of technology in electronics engineering, and I graduated in 2020. Um, I participated in a few clubs, ACM NITK, as you all know. I was the vice chair in 2019, 2020. I was part of the Literary Stage Debating Society at NITK, and also very, very, very close to my heart, the volleyball team. Loved all these experiences, and I think they were like super helpful. And I interned at Fidelity Investments, did a software engineering role, and then I decided in that moment that software engineering was not for me. I added this question below. Why did I decide to go into analytics or banking? And I think that's important. I think one kind of important decision you're faced with when you're at an ITK is what kind of like what do you want to do after you graduate, which is I think a very difficult question to answer because there's like so much to explore and maybe like a lot of friends might be moved as is the trend at NIT. A lot of friends of yours maybe going into software engineering, choosing to pursue like more kind of traditional roles. And I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm just saying if you want to do something different, maybe it's a little intimidating when you see everyone kind of pursuing these traditional roles. So my first kind of bit of advice, my shameless, maybe unsolicited advice, is to like be very firm when you push in a particular direction. If you don't want to do a software job, then be very firm in that. Don't sit for your software placements. Actively seek out other opportunities. And for me, like the first kind of push in that was giving up my pre-placement offer at Fidelity and actually like choosing to sit for placements again so that I would, end up like re applying only to roles that were more analytics centered that didn't really have a software engineering component. And that was really important to me. That's my first bit of advice here, which is that like it, be very firm in what you want and like really push very hard in that direction. Why did I choose to do analytics? I knew that I didn't really want to do software engineering after my internship, and I to me analytics seemed like an interesting neutral way of of pursuing what I thought would be cool, which is like just exploring different career options. And analytics was very broad. It was very, um, very like all inclusive. I could move different industries from there. So that was my rationale. So my here comes my second bit of advice, which is when you do something, at least I personally feel like you should always do it with a certain rationale in mind or like a certain direction. It's that was analytics was that for me, and it and I think it's like fair to say that even since then, even after NITK, after I left Wells Fargo, in analytics, I like have always tried to do things with like a particular rationale in mind. And yeah, that's my second bit of advice. The first one is push and believe in what you want, and the second is always have a rationale for what you want and why you're doing something. Um, yeah, we can move. Thank you. Perfect. So then I um, started working at Wells Fargo in the analytics space. My role was designated an analytics consultant, And that's just a fancy way for Wells Fargo, the entire banking ecosystem, to say that I built dashboards for different teams across the bank. I was basically helping um, glean out like recommendations from the dashboards that I built and providing it to these teams that were my clients. It was consulting within the bank, which meant that it was a horizontal. I worked across a lot of different divisions, which was really interesting and really important for my growth. I worked with banking teams, so mostly the middle market banking team, which sits in the US and serves clients um, that clients that are firms, but more smaller scale firms rather than like not really small businesses, but not really like the Googles or the like Apples of the world. I yeah, and I also worked with a lot of operations teams. So these were like teams that made staff hiring decisions, staff firing decisions, cost cutting decisions, which was important because it helped me like understand how data could really back these decisions. I also worked with Wells Fargo Advisors, which was really interesting. So this is the investment banking arm of the bank, and I did some analytics for them on their like on one of their clients a long time ago. I don't fully remember what the exact thing was. So I think here I put in the how did I decide I wanted to do something different beyond analytics? Because the job was interesting, but I don't think I like fully had satisfaction in it. This here comes my number three bit of advice, which is um, always look for happiness, as cheesy as it sounds. The role at Wells Fargo was fine. It wasn't, you know, I didn't dislike it, but I didn't particularly like it. I didn't particularly find joy in my work. I just thought that it was something that I did but work constitutes a majority of your life. And I think it's very important to have that satisfaction that comes from your job, which is why I would say like I was actually trying to seek out situations where I would be happier and where I could do things that made me happier. Yeah, so I mean, I this led to the part where I wanted to use the analytics knowledge that I'd acquired at in a situation that would make the world a better place. Again, as cheesy as that sounds, make the world a better place. And that led me to the UNDP. So if we move to the next slide, this is a little bit of like my path within the development sector. I should also preface this by saying before I went to the UNDP, I spent some time volunteering with UN volunteers and also with UNI. At UNI, I taught English and I also helped manage one of their centers for 1 year. And I then went to the UNB, which is the UN volunteer system. I volunteered for the project I was later consulted on. So it was called, and I also did some independent work in monitoring and evaluation, which is very, very, very closely tied to analytics. So I was trying to use the knowledge I'd acquired within the analytics space to apply to work in the development sector and making governments work better and making like NGOs measure their impact. That was what interested me, and to this day actually does interest me quite a bit. So yeah, that was a little bit of that. I then got contracted by the UNDP formally, where I helped wrap up this project that measured basically the policy response to COVID-19 along economic, social, labor market measures. You can check out the project if you want. It's shameless plug for all the work that I did. And after the UNDP is a very large bureaucratic organization. And I think sometimes it's very easy to get lost within larger organizations. And I did feel like I wanted more, like I love the development sector. I love the work at the UNDP, but I felt like I wanted it to be closer to the ground, closer to what implementation looked like rather than larger policy and advocacy work, which is why I moved to Instiglio, which is where I am right now. And like I said, what we do is we work with the government, we work with like foundations to help them to provide them what we call technical assistance and help them design their projects and programs better. That's what I've been involved in since, apart from the time when I was at MIT. So these larger questions, why did I decide that the development sector was for me? I think for this, it's more so understanding what your interests are, and where you want to make a difference. I really enjoy like grappling with, as we all do, with large problems, with problems that I don't see solutions to. And this, I think, is something that is common between research and the development sector. But for the development sector, I'd like to see the implementation that happens. And again, this was like very personal. I, advice number four, whatever you want to do, ask yourself why it is for you and what value you see in it, and where whether you think you can like create impact in that space. Whether I will pick this because my sister is a software engineer, but like whether you think that, you know, you can join an Apple and really create some impact there, that's important and that's you. And if you're passionate about that, you should totally do that. But I feel like you should always ask yourself why you choose to do a particular thing, and whether that role makes you comfortable and uncomfortable at the same time. Um, why did I land at Instiglio? The UNDP is amazing. And why did I leave? And I feel like it really depends. Like I said, it's easier to get lost in larger bureaucratic organizations, and I wanted to be closer to the ground. And again, I think it's important to ask yourself the question of where you can create impact and what you can do to really make the world better. And that doesn't again have to be the development sector. It can be working in like medical adjacent stuff. It can be working in sustainability. It can be absolutely anything. Just ask yourself what you like and how that makes sense in the larger scheme of your life, and that's important. Now I think this is something that I put in there because I've had the joy, the pleasure, and the horror of working at the UN. Um, what did I love about the UN and what did I hate about the UN? What I loved is just their ability to have such larger projects funded by such big bodies. The project that I was working on was funded by the Korean government, and it was a project at a global level. And I think that scale is something that organizations like the UN, the World Bank, the you know, that level of organizations are able to achieve, which I think is amazing, just in terms of where you can go from it. What I didn't like about it, of course, was the bureaucracy and how um, sometimes we spent money on things that were entirely unnecessary. Um, yeah, that was what I loved and what I disliked about the UN. We can move to the next slide where I talk about MIT a little bit. So, yeah, MIT, I'm going to be really quick on this slide because I want to move to a small section where I have certain questions that were posed to me. I did a master's in data economics development policy. It was the most fascinating educational experience of my life because I got to take classes at MIT and at Harvard, which are just two totally different worlds. I also probably met some of the most interesting, smart, fascinating people that I ever have met in my life. And yeah, both inside and outside of class. And I had the absolute amazing, wonderful time of interviewing Esther Duflo, who won the Nobel Prize in 2019 in economics. So why did I choose? So I think one other thing which I tell everyone who talks to me personally is when you're applying to grad school, don't apply to any safe schools. Again, this is probably a hot take because I think a lot of people like to say, you know, apply to safe schools, but I think, you know, when you apply to grad school, you need to know that you really want to go to this place. And I would say only apply to places that you really want to go to. That is my very, very hot take on applying to grad school. Um, but yeah, why did I choose MIT? So one of the reasons I chose MIT was I wanted to be able to take classes across the board at Harvard, at MIT Sloan, at basically different institutions apart from MIT Economics, and I couldn't do this anywhere else that I was admitted to and that I applied to. And yeah, that was very important to me. I also my program is really short. It's little under a year, and that's a timeline that I wanted to work with, and it's a timeline that I really was comfortable with. So that's another reason I chose MIT. That's why it was right for me. Some people might want to do a 2 year larger grad school program, and that's important. I feel like things like this are very important while you consider when you consider where you want to apply to and why you apply to those places. And yeah, that was definitely something that was perfect for me. Also location. I The US was the most convenient for me logistics wise to move to. It's very I think all of this is very important when you pick a grad school. Don't just go by like ranking what's number one on your list on the list of like best places to go to. It's not that. It's not always about that. You should definitely be picking what is right for you. And if that's a PhD program, it's applying with like a researcher who maybe works in your area of interest, or you know a lab that exists in a particular school that uh, is super interesting to you. That's definitely things to consider when you apply to schools, which is me short for saying do a lot of research before you decide to apply somewhere. What are my takeaways? Honestly, I think we can skip this in the interest of time, so we can just move to the next slide. So these are the questions that were posed to me, and I'm going to go. I feel like I answered some of them, but I want to go through the important ones and stuff that I deem to be important and added in additionally as well. The first one is how's my experience at NITK contribute to my personal and professional growth at MIT and my workplace? I think one thing that NITK really, really did teach me, and I feel like you should do a lot, is learning to interact with different kinds of people from different walks of life. I had the privilege of being in EE, and I also had the privilege of like, you know, um, being in a class with like people from different walks of life, which I think was so important in me understanding where I can really, where I can really like learn to talk to different people who have different interests, who have different backgrounds, and that helped me not just it helped me at MIT, where people were where my cohort was 21 people from I think 13 or 14 different countries, which is super important. You should be able to really relate and talk to everyone. Another kind of space where it helps me at work is I work in the development sector and I work in East Africa. I work with people in the government who are like so different from me, who've grown up with different backgrounds. And it's important that I'm able to communicate with them, to be able to relate with them. And I think that is my biggest takeaway from NITK. And for that, I would say you really do have to interact with everyone. Get out of your comfort zone, get out of your friend group, all of that. Looking back, is there anything that I would have done differently during my time at NITK? Honestly, not really. I um even like I think um I mean I kept this question in because I really wanted to say not really. And I really wanted to tell you guys to do things like without regrets. Like if there's something you really want to do at an ITK, if there's a club you want to join, you should do it. If there's a job you want to apply to, you should do it. Like just don't overthink the whole what will my friends think? What will uh does this make sense? So yeah, like kind of I guess shameless plug for saying live life regretlessly. Um how did my involvement in ACM help? That is probably a really good question. ACM has given me some of my best friends, some of the best mentors ever in my life. Um, yeah, I don't know if any of them are here today. They might be. Some of them are actually were really keen to hear this. But yeah, ACM has given me a lot of really good, important mentors and a lot of like good friends who've been really supportive in my journey, which is important. And this is also a larger than ITK thing. They've given me some of my best friends. Professionally, I would say it's also helped me learn how to lead teams a little bit. Being the vice chair and really managing these ACM work streams. Work streams is such a professional word. I hate myself for using that. But managing these like kind of activities, managing events, really like running um, the show sometimes, I think was really helpful in discovering how I could do the same at work. Um, Personally, of course, like I said, mentors, super important. I have a question on that in the end, which I absolutely refuse to skip. So let's go to the next slide. Yeah, so pre-applying to MIT, what motivated me to pursue further studies? Like I said, I was shifting sectors. So I was moving from from engineering to analytics, from analytics to development. And I really felt like I would benefit from an academic environment where I was learning about, where I was learning basically how to do development, but not in the field. And I think that perspective was really important. That was what motivated me. I just knew that I needed an academic push, if you call it that, in terms of, you know, what I wanted to do and like what made sense in the larger scheme of my life. How did I navigate the application process, which is really important. Okay, so one thing that I did was like I picked out 4 universities I wanted to apply to, and that's the only 4 that I applied to. It was also to me like very important to pick universities that that I would absolutely go to if I got into. That was a key kind of thing for me. One other thing is the statement of purpose. Um, the statement of purpose, like I think like what I did was I like really started on it early, and that's really important because when you start on something early, you give yourself the time and the space to like do things well without like stressing yourself out, to have like multiple reviews of this particular thing that's like so important. I also picked my like letters of recommendation really well. It's important, very, 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 very important that the person that you're picking is not like just someone fancy. They have to be your strongest and your biggest advocate. They have to be someone who's your cheerleader. They have to sing your praises, which is what I think my recommenders did an excellent job of. Um, yeah, that's my uh, I think going to MIT is different. Like if the experience is different for everyone, and I wouldn't say that like, this is like the one thing that you should do. Of course, if any of you go to MIT, please hit me up on LinkedIn. My name's my name on LinkedIn, so you should be able to find me, and I will give you a long list of stuff I love to do at MIT. But that being said, I think the experience is very different, so I wouldn't want to demean it and say, this is what you should expect. But yeah, I think while applying what I said in general, start on your SOP early. And again, this sounds so repetitive. Everyone told me this, but the importance of it is really, really underrated. Start on your work early. Um, do your SOP well. Get people to review it. Get 3 people to review it. It's very important. The English needs to be great. The structuring, the framing needs to be great. You have to be telling a story. Archita, who speaks next, yeah, she's probably also going to tell you stuff like this because we both are good friends who've had similar conversations about things like this. But yeah, it's important that she reiterated and I say it. We can move to the next slide. Thank you. MIT. So my coursework. I think they mentioned in my introduction some of the courses I did, but in general, what my course was structured around was using and leveraging both data and economics to like shape policy better, to improve development. This means that I took courses in economics and econometrics and also largely in the development space. Um, and that's because this is what I'm interested in. There were definitely people who did more like economics and more like ethics, more data or game theory centered courses. Some of my best friends did that. Best friends, of course, did that. But yeah, this is generally what my course was structured around. I think it's an excellent program for anyone who's interested in the development space, or interested in larger economic research, but it's not really a research focused program. It is meant for people who work in the industry, who are passionate about the industry, who want to understand who want to deepen their economics knowledge and apply it to the industry. So yeah, that's a little bit about my coursework. We can move on to the next slide. Um, okay, yes, perfect. So development. Um, People who want to work in international development, I would say you really have. So it's again discover international development is huge, and of course, I'm happy to actually at any point of time. If you're interested, please hit me up on LinkedIn. Happy to like tell you what the international development space looks like. But I think again, do your own research. There's a lot of organizations. There's like larger organizations. There's smaller NGOs that work in development. There's the government itself. There is there's like more civil society organizations, more consulting groups, finance. There's a lot of players here, and I think what my biggest bit of advice here is to really figure out where you fit in and what your interests are and how they align with actors in the international development space. Um, and yeah, that's it. And don't be afraid of like trying something in the development space and then being like, oh, this isn't really what I like. I would like to do something a little different. Um, that is important. How's my experience influenced my perspective on the future of international development? This is very interesting because this is a conversation that I can spend more than 30 minutes talking about. But largely, I would say the ethics of development are interesting, and it doesn't make it. Sometimes I've had to question whether it makes sense that I work in international development, whether I offer to aid or develop other countries. But I kind of calm myself down, situate myself by saying that this is more so that I work with the government, and I am at the end of the day helping the government. But as a whole, the international development space I think is here to stay. Um, every day we face new challenges. Like climate change is the biggest thing, is one of the biggest problems we work on now. The refugee and urban displacement space is a challenge I'm currently working on because I work with the governments of Uganda and Ethiopia to help them address their refugee challenges. Um, and when I say challenges, I don't mean the refugee influx. I mean what happens when additional refugees come in. How do you deal with people in your country? How are you able to provide these people resources like health, like education? Where are they going to live? What are they going to eat? How do you allocate the limited funding that you have um, amongst your citizens and amongst the refugees that need help? Yeah, questions like this is what I work on every day now. And it's very cool and it's very interesting to me, but might not be as interesting to you, which is okay. Um, so my last question, the last question I have in there. So if you go to the next slide, that's the last question, which I think is the most important, and I refuse to skip. Though I told Archita I would keep time. I'm sorry in advance. So what role did mentorship play in my kind of journey? I think mentors have really like shaped my journey at every instance of my life. Um, Literally starting from NITK, I can name the people who really helped me move forward, whether that's within ACM, within the larger NITK ecosystem, or even when I was applying for placements. And this is me saying you should find yourself a mentor or mentors or people who really champion you and are able to guide you in different ways. And your mentor doesn't have to be like one person at every single time. A mentor is like someone who will guide you in that particular instance in life. And when you move on, if you have a different mentor, that's okay. That's honestly acceptable. That's desirable. Um, yeah. So my last and probably most important bit of advice is wherever you are in your journey, find yourself a mentor and find yourself like a champion, someone who is able to guide you. And I don't say hand, I want to say guide, I don't mean handhold. I mean just kind of direct you and help you out whenever needed. And this is generally people who are already in your life. Maybe someone, if you're in your third year, maybe someone who's in the final year, maybe if you're a little younger, someone who's a little older than that. Maybe if you're in your final year, maybe it's some of the alumni at NITK. My Some of my first NITK mentors are just like people who were in ACM who were like above me. Um, yeah, so I think it's very important that you find yourself a mentor. So on that fun note, I thank you guys for inviting me to do this. I really appreciate it. I hope that I was 10% at least helpful, and I will hand it back to the host and then to Achita, who I'm really excited to hear speak. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sitara. It was so enriching to listening to you talk. And yeah, thank you so much for taking out time to come speak with us. Now we have Archita Sajjan, who was a graduate from the 2021 batch. She studied from metallurgy. She did a bachelor's in metallurgy. Pranav, slides.
Yeah, give me a minute. I'll just share the slides.
Yeah, Archita, she's currently working in business analysis and quality engineering. She was one of in the top 5% when she graduated from NITK. She was the top 5% of her department. Upon her completing her undergraduate, she pursued a master's in engineering management at Dartmouth College, further expanding her knowledge in areas such as product management, data analytics, and innovation. Alongside her studies, she had actively participated in various clubs and organizations, including serving as the president of the ECEL and vice chairperson of ACM and ACMW. Her work experiences have revolved around technical roles, including a year long position as technical analyst at Fidelity Investments. Collaborating with global teams, she contributing to testing frameworks, automation scripts, and integration of testing automation into Fidelity's cloud framework. Currently, she is working as a technical product management intern at Visa. In summary, she's a results-driven professional with a strong academic background in business analysis and quality engineering. She brings a unique blend of technical acumen, project management skills, and a passion for innovation to her role. So, uh, Archita, you can go ahead.
Thank you so much, guys. Yeah, that was a lot of words. I don't know if I'll be able to give justice to all of that, but hi everyone. My name is Archita. I'm currently a master's in engineering management student at Dartmouth, and during my summer, I'm working with Visa in their risk and authentication products as a technical product management intern. So very excited to be here. Always happy to be back to ACM, which had a very special spot in my life for sure. So let's get started. Yeah. So a little bit about me. I graduated in metallurgical engineering in 2021. Hated the subject, but worked towards the GPA. But after that, I had transitioned into software while I was in NITK by doing an internship at Fidelity, and they gave me a full time offer to return back. Like I said again, hated it. Was I loved tech, but I did not like working as a software engineer. So I realized at some point that I need to transition. This meme was literally me in that 1 year I was working as a software engineer. So what to do, yeah? It came to a point where I was like, what am I getting paid for? Am I adding some kind of value to my role? Am I doing justice to my role? And or can I do something better? So what I thought was, let me shift into more of a product based role, which is not only understanding the technical aspects of it, but also understanding who are my users, what are the business sides of things, and working at a level where I thought I could contribute more. So, how did I decide to do that? I decided to pursue a master's degree in the US because I was like, there are a lot of product openings and product roles in the US. So, let me use this master's in order to transition. So that's why I pursued my MEM in the US. And now, currently in the summer, I'm working as a TPM intern at Visa, which is basically working with one of their products, which is getting migrated onto another platform and handling 2 or 3 different modules of it, which obviously I will get into more details as I go through the talk. So, moving on to the next one. This is sort of the high level agenda of today's talk. So I'm just going to talk more. It's like a story for me, and I hope that it resonates with at least some of you out there. So it all starts in undergrad, right? That's where it all started for me, and how it started, and what did I do in undergrad and how it helped. After that, I've already sort of given a little bit light into why I decided to pursue MEM. So I'll just go a little bit more in details about that and how to apply for it. What was the application process like? I'll also touch a little bit upon what the life in US is all about, which is, I think, the biggest thing that we sort of tend to overlook, but it's really important. And finally, what is product management, how you can get into it, and why would you like it? And along the way, I have a free advices. If you want to listen, go ahead. If you don't, that's totally fine as well. So that's about what the agenda for today is. So let's just get quickly into, how undergrad sort of helped me and what did I do during my undergrad. So we can move on to the next slide, guys. Yeah. I think Sitara already touched upon it, and that was the part I was also able to get a little bit, listen into. What mattered most to me in undergrad is the different sort of people that I met. And how did I meet these people, right? I met these people through different clubs. For me, that was ACM, that was ECEL, and also through my classroom. And what did that do? So I came, when we are in 11th and 12th, you all will probably relate to this, that most of the time sort of goes in studying. There's very little time to socialize, and you don't even know if there's a point to it. So when I was in my 11th and 12th, I was very like, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to get into an engineering college that I like. That was about it. But when I came into college, I realized that that outlook was not enough. I needed to know about something that I want to do in my life. What is it from a career point of view that I want to do? How can I create value into something? What is it that I want to learn? And these are the questions you start asking yourself, right? When you just join in, like, what is it that I want to do, 4 years down the line, 5 years down the line after graduating from college? And I think those are really important questions that you find somewhat of an answer to in your undergrad. And how you do that, for me, that was by meeting people. So the people that I met, for example, in ACM or ECEL, the seniors that I met guided me throughout the way. The first thing that they taught me was, you have to do something in your life. And you have to do something that you like, because that's how you will grow. If you do something that you don't like, at a point you will hit a saturation. So find something that you like doing and pursue a career towards that. And that was important. And that being said, when I joined software, even though it was not something I completely enjoyed, I did like tech. And now I've realized that I want to continue staying in tech, just not as a software engineer. And having that kind of at least a goal, at least a preliminary goal, I feel is very important. So I remember Sitara just talking about mentors, and I have to say, she was, for example, for me, one of the biggest mentors who guided me, about what to do and how to do that, and who gave me like very pointed advice. And I met such other mentors throughout the course of undergrad as well. And that has been the biggest, I would say, life changing experience for me, because I saw how passionate they were, how motivated they were, and on at the same time they also knew how to have fun, and that was a concept that was foreign to me. So I feel that the biggest change that happened to me was meeting these people, these mentors who guided me, with all that they had and helped me find a path. I also made some friends who were really motivated about what they wanted to do, and that motivated me as well to pursue something that I like. And finally, the most important thing out of everything is you've got a lot of things around you. When you join an undergrad, if you take the opportunity, you have clubs, you have projects, you have competitions, you can write research papers, whatnot. And all of that is an opportunity to find out what you like or gain probably a hard skill or a soft skill towards something. And that is something we sometimes tend to overlook and not take advantage of. But I feel that the most important thing in undergrad is utilize every single resources, from people to the other resources such as competitions, projects, clubs, papers, whatever it is, and make the best of it. Because that will sort of help you identify what you like and what you don't like. And having that really helps. So what did I get out of my undergrad? After grinding through metallurgy, realizing that I don't like it, transitioning into software, doing a couple of internships, doing projects, whatever I could, like just doing whatever I could, what I found was, number one, motivation to do something and find something that I like. And the second thing was resilience. Like, for example, when you transition, for example, from a core branch into software, initially you'll fail, fail a couple of times. Initially, you'll be like, okay, how do I sort of transition into this? And how do I, go ahead with that transition? And most of the time, your plan A is not going to work. Like 90% of the time, plan A will fail, and that's completely okay. So just having that understanding that, okay, I need to have like plan A to plan Z probably. And, if plan A doesn't work, try plan B. If plan B doesn't work, try plan C. That resilience was extremely important. And when I realized that it was important was when I came to the US and I realized that everything is really just built upon resilience. And I'll tell you guys a little bit about this, but most of the time the internships that you want, the processes that you like, and the things that you think work may not work. So you have to iterate, you have to change. And what really helps you go through that process is having that resilience and be like, okay, if I fail number one, I will try to get through number two. If I fail number two, I will try to get through number three. So having the mindset and building the mindset, I would say, is the most important part of building your further career, as well as trying to take this opportunity to build some hard skills and soft skills. But most important thing is mindset, because that's what gets you through everything in the future. So I would first of all encourage you guys to, do whatever you can in the undergrad in order to find out what you like and sort of create multiple plans towards it. And second thing is have a mindset that's robust and helps you, get through challenges, because these challenges you will keep on facing as you make decisions to further advance in your career. If you're comfortable, that's also fine. But when you're not comfortable, you will face challenges. And when those challenges come in, the mindset is what's going to help you get through it, nothing else. So that was my learning out of the undergrad. So now moving on to why MEM, right? Journey to MEM. So, as I mentioned before, I personally did not really enjoy my work as a software engineer, and I felt that I was not adding as much value that I wanted to. I was not doing something that I was super passionate about. I liked the technologies, but that was about it. Did I want to have a role where I was creating, testing scripts or whatever, like quality engineering? I don't think so. I was not very like it was not very favorable for me. I did not enjoy it. Neither did I feel that I was creating any value for the company. But I did learn a lot out of it. I learned a lot about user flows. I learned a lot about, how in general products work. I learned about different technologies like basic hard skills in cloud computing, automation, DevOps, etc. But what I did not get was that feeling of creating value. So I wanted to transition into product. And that's why I decided to pursue MEM. Now, here is a big disclaimer that you can change your career in multiple different ways. MEM is not the only degree. Even if you don't get a degree, you can transition. There are several different ways to do this, right? Like I mentioned, there's plan A to plan Z. You have multiple different plans. My plan was to get an MEM because what I realized when I heard about this degree and when I did some research, I realized that most of the people who do it transition into product. So I decided to apply for it. Now, what was the application process like and how it played out for me was it's a very standard application process for, any US college, for any master's degree, I would say. You have an SOP that you have to write, you have 3 LORs that you have to submit, you have to submit your resume. Scores are sometimes optional, sometimes they're not. Those are the scores that I got. And that's the whole package. Now, the thing about this is, there's no right formula about this application will work and this application will not work, because every college, and you might think that this is something that people just say, but this is something I've personally realized after going to Dartmouth, that every college has different criteria that they're looking for. Every college has different kind of people that they're looking for, and they somehow try to identify these kind of people through the resume, through the interviews that they take. So if you get rejected from a college you thought you had a sure shot, get in, that's okay, because it might not be you, it might just be the people that they're looking for. So whenever it comes to applications especially, I always recommend doing your best with the factors that you can control, which is, the application materials that you have in hand. After that, it's really up to the college to admit you or not. But obviously, you have to do your best with the LORs, SOPs, resume, and everything that you're creating. That's all you can do. So it's better to focus on that. So I applied to 8 schools in total, as you can see here, and I got into 5 of them. Dartmouth was always my first choice, so that's why I decided to go into it. For the application, I think it's really important. Like, one thing to remember for SOP and LOR and resume is that you need to get this reviewed multiple times and take every single suggestion with a grain of salt, because you don't want to implement everything that, like, I don't know, 100 different people are telling you. You want to just implement what you think might make sense for you and might not make sense for you. For me, I took help from College Pond for the application, which is admissions consultant. The reason for that was I didn't want to spend enough time to calling out to people, getting it reviewed, writing everything myself. And also, with respect to the LORs, SOP, you have to make sure that the voices are different, even if you're writing it yourself. So it's just much helpful for me to get that help. And eventually they helped me with the visa processes and everything as well. So it turned out pretty well for me. So I think that is one of the biggest things to remember. For you, it's up to you to decide how much time you want to put into these applications. And based on that, you can plan it out. If you are ready and if you have the time to put in, like, extra effort, and you can do everything yourself, connect with people, get it reviewed, then you're good to go. If you don't have that time, there's nothing wrong with getting help from admission consultants if you can afford it. I definitely think that you should just do based on how much time you have and based on what would be the best kind of solution for you. So that's a little bit about the application process. And one thing to remember about this is master's is not your end goal, right? Whenever you're choosing a master's, or whenever you're choosing an application, or whenever you're even writing your SOP, you have to keep one thing in mind, that getting into a master's program is not a goal. The goal is to do something about that master's program. So what that goal is, and based on that, which college would be a good fit for you, and based on that, which coursework would be a good fit for you, that is what should reflect in your SOP, and that is what should reflect in your mindset as well. So one of the reasons why I chose Dartmouth, say, over like Purdue, was Dartmouth people got more into tech and Purdue got more into supply chain. Supply chain was not something I had any interest in. So always make sure you know what your end goal is, or at least a preliminary end goal is. That can obviously change over time, and it's good to be flexible. But having that idea of, what that kind of a goal could be helps you with your application process. That's the goal that goes into your SOP, and that's the goal that you keep in mind as well when you go into the college. So always remember that what is it that I want to do after this program, and which program is going to help me get closer to that particular goal. And finally, the reasons for choosing Dartmouth was that it's an Ivy. It has a really, really good business school, which is the Tuck School of Business. The coursework was like 50-50 around data analytics and business, which was pretty good for me. The community is really small. It's a small cohort. It's a 60 people cohort. And it had quite a bit of, tech placements and product management, which is something that I saw. So that's why I ended up choosing Dartmouth. I was really happy when I got it. And how the journey went from there is something I would love to talk about next. So we can move on to the next slide. Yeah. Now, journey in MEM. So once the application process gets over, we just relax, right? Like, it's done. Now you just have to go to the college. But actually, the process starts from there. So the thing is, after your applications are over, after you've gotten your admits and you're sure which one you want to go with, even choosing process, if all of your likes are on kind of the same level, even choosing is hard. But after you've chosen it, paid the fees or whatever, after that, the real thing starts. First thing, it starts with, preparing for your visa, packing, getting ready to go to the US. And after all of that is done, once you reach the US, that's where, like, you realize the changes that have come with it. So life in the US is very, very different, and that's something I would want to, get into in the due time. So my goal was to change my career. Has it happened? Partially. We'll know when we get full time. But let me talk about the MEM course. And this is very specific to Dartmouth. I think some of the courses are similar as well. Like, I think Duke has a similar course. But whatever I'm going to talk about is very specific to Dartmouth. Every single MEM college has a very different list of courses and very different expectations. It's different for each college. For me, the coursework was easy because it's a pass or fail course. which in my opinion is really important for a master's program, because there are a lot of other things to focus on. When you have only 15 months, and that seems like a long time, but it's really not, because in that sort of set of 15 months, the first 3 months will go into adjusting, getting used to the lifestyle in the US, getting used to the food. So it's simple things like getting used to the cleaning schedule, getting used to the food, getting used to the environment, getting used to the transportation, all of that, just simple things, but that takes time. There are a lot of processes as well that you have to do when you come to the US. For example, opening a bank account, getting a credit card, applying for SSN, you know, getting your rental sort of agreements. All of that really matters, and that takes time. Along with that, there are other things that you want to do in college. For example, you might want to do research, or you might want to sort of take courses that you like but might be hard, or you want to put the entire time into finding internships, which is also totally fine, because it seems like a long time, like 9 months to find internship, but it's really, really not. So because you have so many other things to think about, I think it's really good that this particular course is a pass or fail course, so that you can focus on the subjects that you like, and you can focus on the things that you like, and you don't have to pay too much attention to the courses that you are not interested in. So for me personally, I took more courses in data than in business, because the area that I was getting into was product management, and that's an area that you can only learn when you are in practice. Obviously, I took some courses related to product management, but the information that they give is nowhere near what it's actually like in the real world. So I personally thought I'll build up more of hard skills, and that's why I took project courses and I took tech courses. And that was a really interesting experience for me, because, for example, I did recently a project in AI which involved, connecting APIs of GPT-4, Whisper, which are all OpenAI tools, in order to sort of create a voice recognition machine and create some visualizations out of it. So that was a really interesting experience for me, because I learned something about the newest AI technologies, LLMs, and model training of those LLMs using prompt engineering. So those were interesting concepts that I could, learn about. It may or may not have something to do with my future career, but at that point, it was definitely something very, very new that I learned about, and I could give time to. So that was a great experience for me. So that brings me to my last point about the coursework, which is that what you want to do in your courses, in your masters, is really, really up to you. They say it's flexible, and it's flexible for a reason. Utilize that flexibility. Take courses that make a difference to you. Obviously, if you have compulsory courses, you have to do it. But otherwise, take courses which you want to learn from and which you want to, do something about. Don't take courses just for the sake of taking courses, because you have such a good opportunity and you're paying also so much for each of those courses. Might as well utilize that to do what you like and what you want to learn. So that's about the coursework. Coming to the internship search process, I mean, this is something I can probably talk an hour about, but I'll keep it short. Like I said it here, it's a struggle till it pays off, because I started looking for an internship in the month of September when I just came in, and I got my internship in April. So it's a long time, right? And my internship was supposed to start from June. So how this thing works is very different for different people, and I have no idea what the formula is. But the only thing that I can tell you is that the biggest thing is you have to keep at it. You have to first create a resume. Then you have to see if that resume works or not by applying to a couple of companies. If it doesn't work, if you're not getting any callbacks, you change it. Then there are two ways to find an internship in the US. The first one is cold applications, which is just going into the website, seeing what openings are there and applying to it. The second one is networking. And networking doesn't mean asking for a referral. I don't think personally referrals work at all. It's more about talking to someone. Maybe if you're applying for a product management role, it's more about, say, talking to a product manager in that company, and if they can forward your resume to the hiring manager, or if they can give you the hiring manager contact, if you can't directly speak to the hiring manager. It can go from things like finding emails on LinkedIn using extensions, sending 10 or 15 people emails. If anyone replies back to you, either they should be a alum from your undergraduate or graduate, or someone in the role. There's a lot of things you have to do, and it's a long process. Then sometimes you have to get on a call with them, be like, okay, this is what I really like, this is what I'm really passionate about, I think I can do a good job, what do you think about this, do you think you can forward my resume to the hiring manager? It's a long process, but that's how networking works. If you can get to the hiring manager, if your resume can get to the hiring manager, and if they like it, they might give you a call back for an interview. But that's just still getting the interview. Now, getting the role after getting an interview is another different task. So I personally, for me, networking did not work, and I did not, like, give that much time into networking. And I realized that this is networking like by the month of March, when I did not have that time to go through it. So I applied cold, and I got like around 9 or 10 interviews, and I cleared just 2 of them. So just because you've gotten an interview doesn't mean you'll clear it. You really, really have to work towards it. I think one of the reasons why a lot of us struggle here is because we do not have actual product experience. And they can figure that out, and they actually sometimes look for it. Like, does this person have some kind of a product experience? If you don't have it, it shows. So that being said, you have to really prepare, and you have to really make sure you know what you're talking about, and you have to be genuine. Sometimes it's okay to be like, in my current company visa, I just said that I want to learn. I know I don't come from a product management background, but that is where I think I can do well in. This is what I understand about it, and I want to learn more if I don't understand correctly. So you have to be, in US it's very different. Obviously you have to butter them up. You have to be like, I really want to work for your company, but you also have to be genuine in the way that it's okay if I don't know, but I want to learn. Especially for internships. Maybe for full time it's different, but especially for internships, you have to be very open about, I really, really want to learn. Give me this opportunity so that I can learn. So that's a little bit about internships. And now the biggest factor is the environment. We can go back for a second. Yeah. So about the environment, this is the biggest change that you will face when you're coming into the US, or probably any foreign country for that matter. Because you'll be really, really far from home. That safety net that was there around you goes away. You have 10 other things to worry about apart from your curriculum, apart from your internship. And the biggest factor out of that is that you're on a visa most of the time. And the fact that you're on a visa really plays at it, because a lot of companies don't sponsor. If you don't get an internship, you're like, do I have to go back to India? And things like that. So the biggest thing that you will need is the ability to adjust to this environment. And it's a huge change. That is something we always overlook. But what's really important is coming mentally prepared for it, that okay, it's going to be a big change for me, it's going to be a challenge for me. I know I'll have to work probably 10 times harder than what I've done back home, but fine, I can do it. If something's not going my way, I will analyze how it's not going my way. I will analyze what's going wrong. I will see what I can do about it, and I will continuously iterate and adapt to the situation. It's extremely important. For example, my initial resume, I got one interview from Google, and I was like, okay, this resume works. But for 3 months after that, I did not get any interviews. And I'm like, wait, is this even working? And after that, I was like, okay, this resume is not going to work. Let me change it. So I changed my resume quite a bit. I made it a lot more producty and added a lot more words. And after that, I also changed the way that I was applying. Initially, I was just applying to whatever openings I saw, whatever days. But eventually, I found sort of a streamlined structure. Okay, I will apply to the roles that are opened in the last 24 hours. And also, I will try to reach out to someone in that company. Even if I can't, at least I will apply to that role in the last 24 hours. And I will see if I'm getting interviews. If I'm not, I will again change my resume. So you have to be really open to, like, iterating and changing. That's extremely important, and that's something to remember, especially for roles like product and like, which are a lot more general management roles. Because the reason for that is there are a lot of people applying for these roles, because they are generalized roles. They are not specialized roles. And because it's so generalized, because so many people are applying for them, that's why it becomes even more competitive. If it's like a more specialized role, and probably there are not that many people who are specialized in that area, obviously there's a higher chance. So you have to be a little more prepared to be rejected. And I applied to 500 companies. I got only 9 interviews. So that's like 490 rejects. And out of that also, I got like only 2 offers. So that means like 497 rejects. So that's okay. You just have to be okay to deal with that reject. Like one reject means nothing. As long as you can clear one by the end of it, that's fine. And having that mindset is extremely important in order to just like do what you want to in the US. So that's a little bit about, life in US and the journey in MEM. And finally, I would want to touch a little bit about product. So we can move on to the next slide. Perfect. Thank you. So product management, right? Even I learned what this is like 1.5 months ago when I started my internship. Initially, I thought it's, about, I don't know, managing a product, managing user needs or whatever. But what it actually means is making the technical or commercialization decisions for any product. Now, what does that mean? I'll explain it to you with an example of what I'm doing currently. So I work with a value-added service of Visa, which is known as Cardinal, that provides something known as EMV 3DS verification. What this is when you go on your Swiggy or your Amazon, and when you're checking out using a credit card or a debit card, you will be redirected to a OTP screen. When you're redirected in those milliseconds, one of those redirect is our product. What that does is it collects all the information from the merchants. It gets every data point that it can. Probably there are like 200 data points, and it will give a risk score to your issuer, which is your bank. And based on the risk score, they will challenge your transaction, which is basically providing an OTP or something like that, or they will let it go. And based on the challenge and how you if you enter the correct OTP or not, your transaction goes through. That's the product that I work with, which is collecting these data points, sort of doing a risk score and validating that transaction. Now, interesting thing about this is my product works with merchants such as Amazon, and there's so many of them, Amazon, WorldPay, Cybersource, etc. What we do is, and then in that also there are different kinds of products. There's an API and there's a portal. I work on the portal, which is the UI that these merchants see. And currently what I'm working on now is this UI, Cardinal was a company that was acquired by Visa a couple of years ago. So now that this UI that I have is getting migrated onto one Visa solution, which is basically for all of their value-added services. Now we're migrating every single module that we had in the UI. And modules means a lot of things: user management, merchant management, transaction management, API key management, etc. Like there's like a whole bunch of modules. And in this, I work with just 2 of those modules. Number 1 is configurations, which is the settings that these merchants had, migrating those, as well as migrating roles, which means if we have a role, internal role in Cardinal, what exactly would that internal role be in Visa? So what I mean by making these technical or commercialization decisions is that when I'm migrating those modules, I have to see technology-wise what would be the requirements. Okay, this particular widget goes here. This particular configuration gets migrated. This configuration does not get migrated. So if this configuration is not getting migrated, what to do with the data that's there? So those are the kind of decisions that I work on making. And when it comes to commercialization decisions, one example of that would be I am doing away, for example, say with some of those configurations, some of those settings that users might have used in the past. But now with this migration goal, we are doing away with them. So they have so much data, they have already used it for a while. How will they adapt to this particular change? That's a commercialization decision. They recently moved to the newer Cardinal portal like 1.5 years ago. Now they again have to move. What is the value that we can provide them so that they're ready to move and so that they go ahead with this migration and so that it adds some kind of a value to them? So those are some of those commercialization decisions that we have to think about. How do you get to those decisions is the biggest part, and that's where talking to people comes in. And it means talking to people from different teams, talking to people across the company. I have spoken to like everyone from a director to a software engineer to a quality engineer because I wanted to figure out what to do with these configurations. For example, there were 150 configurations, and I guess 50 of them had different people who were looking into it. So that was like a minimum number of people I spoke to in order to know whether they're still using it or not. What can we do with that data? Or what could be a decision to take on it? Even for some, say, for example, I had a list of 5 configurations, I spoke to 3 different sets of people in order to come to a decision about those. So it's like that. You have to talk to different interdisciplinary teams who are handling this product, who know the code, who know the merchant side of things, who know the user side of things, and sort of find a common ground and see what is it that works for this particular requirement, what would be the requirement based on what these people are saying. So that's why talking to people is probably the most important part, and that's the maximum part as well when you're doing a product management role. The second thing is reading a lot of documentation. So for product managers, it's very important to create documentation. And some of you who might have worked in tech might know about Confluence and Wiki, Visa Wiki, and so we have Visa Wiki, which is basically a Confluence page. Basically, it's like you create a lot of internal documents and you keep on reading those documents, keep on iterating them, and you create new documents based on, so that those documents could be read by your software engineers, quality engineers, and designers in order for them to use it to do the coding. And finally, the most important part is researching users. When it comes to a product, you cannot make a decision without keeping users in mind. Sometimes you have to talk to them directly, sometimes you have to get the data from teams who are talking to them directly. And sometimes you have to communicate things to them directly. So talking to users is extremely important in understanding what they need and what they want, because they are the one who drives any kind of company and any kind of product. The features that you will have will depend on what the users want to a certain extent. So there has to be communication with them also. We can't add everything that they want, but we'll reach a common ground to make sure that they're getting the maximum value possible out of it. And finally, there are different kinds of product managers as well. I work in execution, which is getting those technical requirements, making it a document, and getting the team to do the work. And for example, my goals have to be done by the end of August. That's the quarter. So that's the execution role. Strategy is more like researching and finding, say, a new product that you want to put into your portfolio. Growth is more about, could be increasing user growth, increasing revenue, what to provide, what kind of features to provide in order to do that. Commercialization, again, involves talking to merchants, talking to users, and providing them the best value, seeing what the user interaction is. Marketing, I think some of you know about PMMs, which are product marketing managers who look into the marketing side of things. So there are a lot of different kinds of product managers, and you got to try to figure out which one do you like, or even if you like product management. So I hope I have covered most of the questions that you guys had with this. And now I can just open it up if you have time for any other questions. If I've gone over time, that's fine. And you can contact me on my LinkedIn or on my email. I do prefer email because I don't check LinkedIn that often. But up to you guys if you want to know more. Thank you. I'm sorry for the extra time that I took.
It's fine. It was so enlightening for us to hear you talk. Okay, so we don't have any questions on YouTube. We do have a couple of questions if you're interested.
Okay.
Enough on what we'll go over the questions.
Yeah, so I think there were a couple of questions like before the talk which we had taken, but then I think both of them have been answered in your talk itself. So yeah,
All
that
right.
should be fine. Yeah. So once again, thank you so much for making the time for giving this insightful talk to us. Thank you
No
so much.
worries. And thank
Yeah.
you so much for inviting me. It's always good to be back. And feel free to share my contact information, especially my email ID. That's where I reply the most.
Yeah.
So with the students, if they want to contact me.
Yeah. Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.